Welcome to Generations, a show which helps people 50 and better lead happy, healthy, and productive lives. Hosted today by Nadia Jordana, and here's Nadia.
Hello, and welcome to Generations, the Roundtable Edition. I'm Nadia Jordana, and co-hosting with me today, Karen Risette. Welcome, Karen.
Hi, Nadia.
And Ellie Freed.
Hello.
Hi, Ellie. And we have two additional panel guests, Catherine Kelly. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
And Deb Delaney.
Hey, Nadia. Hi, everybody.
Glad
nice
to be
see
here.
you.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't already guessed by the way I'm dressed here today, I've added my vintage Wayfair eyeglasses and a silk scarf around my neck. Our topic of discussion is to be the 1950s. What do you think about that, ladies?
I think it's just so much fun to think back to that era. I was a teenager in the 50s, so I remember lots of fun music, dancing, American Bandstand, all that era, and the slow dancing to dreamy songs. Mr. Sandman and all that, you know, really wonderful music.
The Lindy.
Yes, and the
Lindy.
twist.
Yeah.
And the twist. American Bandstand, you know, I lived on a farm, and it came on, I think it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at least where I lived. And I missed it so frequently because 4 o'clock was about the time I had to go out to bring the cows home. And it was so disappointing. I wish we had the things that we had today so that I could have taped that program, because I would have been right there watching every second of it.
That's where I was, and I remember racing home from school to watch it. And so the 50s for me were a real happy time. My dad had served in World War II in the 40s, and he was home, and our life was stabilized after all that. And so for me, it was a happy time.
I think for a lot of the country, it was a happy time. Part of the things that a quieter time, a happy time.
And the TV shows kind of reflected a lot of those things too.
They
Actually,
did.
families felt a little bit like some of the stuff on the TV. We ate dinner together, and people came home from school and kind of saw brothers and sisters. And but I had a question. I was younger. I was born in '47, so by the 50s I was younger, and then going into high school later. But did they have sock hops then too?
Yes.
So everybody was the sock hops. And tell me about the skirts at that time. Were they the pink?
The poodle skirt?
Poodle skirt is what I was trying to think
Pink
of.
and black colors. Yep, and the skirts, and then saddle shoes.
Saddle shoes.
Oh,
Cut from
sure.
a circle, weren't they?
Yes.
Yep.
And there were crinolines underneath it to make them kind of stand out, you know.
Well, I actually was born in the 50s, so
You have a different perspective.
yeah, from, you know, I can talk of 4 years, but I was born in 1956, but I actually was a daycare child back in the 50s, which was
That
really
was
rare
unusual.
because that era was most of I remember my neighbors and their friends, and their mom stayed home, but my mom was an executive in her time, and my dad was a teacher, a professor at St. Thomas. So I just remember growing up always going to daycare or going to school. But what's so interesting to hear all this in the 50s, it traveled over to the 60s because I was American Bandstand. I did all that. So
Exactly.
But I think most of you know by now that I have an adult day center. So I did ask some questions to my participants who may have Alzheimer's or what do they remember, and they remembered a couple of them say that they remember how cheap things were, like meat, and going to the movies, a cup of coffee, and they started school at age 4, you know, back then. You know, some of them did, because I think it was farmers. A lot of them were farmers. They remember that power steering was introduced in *51. So
was?
power steering.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You were there before the power steering. Huh? You knew what it was like.
And seat belts were introduced in the 50s, too.
I
Were
thought
they
came
really?
later.
1952.
Wow.
I learned to drive in the 50s, about 1956. and the car that I drove was a pastel green Oldsmobile 98.
Oh.
It was so big you just wouldn't believe it. And the fact I learned to parallel park in that car, I still wonder how I ever did that. But cars and teenagers were a big deal thing then.
Yes.
Oh, how great. And you know what? Since we're talking about cars, let's take a brief pause. We've got a clip to show you, and then we'll be back to continue our discussion about cars and being teenagers. And we're back, and let's continue our discussion. I remember a boyfriend that I had who drove a black 50 Ford. Now, this was a couple of years later, but right back to the 1950s, that black 50 Ford was still a popular car, and one that teenagers of the 60s could afford and enjoy.
Yep.
What I wonder about was the back seat. Wasn't there sort of some stories about those huge back seats?
Yeah.
I seem to have heard some good stuff
I
going on
never
in
got in
those
the back
cars.
seat of that one.
That
but-
traveled to the 60s too, so.
But when they drove, am I right? People would drive to the drive-ins to get the food that came to the window and the
Oh my goodness.
That was
people.
a blast.
Yeah, going around on the roller skates. Am I correct to serve
Yeah.
in some places?
Oh,
And we had
drive-ins
drive-in
for food,
movies,
and
too.
I
Oh,
was
the drive-in
thinking
movies.
Oh,
drive-in
the drive-ins
movies.
for movies.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
That
We
back
had-
seat came handy.
Yeah. Please.
I was married the year you were born, 56, and we owned a 51 Mercury, a 54 Chevy Bel Air, and a 57, not all at the same time now, 57 station wagon during the course of the 50s. And you know, some of the fun things that were going on then. Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip had just been married in the late 40s, and they had Prince Charles then, and then Princess Anne was born in the 1950, I think, and then Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier were married in 56, same
That
year.
was a big
same
story
year
in those
I was.
days, yeah.
Yeah, her engagement ring was a 12-carat emerald cut diamond.
Boy.
Can you imagine?
No.
There were lots of headlines
Yeah.
on her getting married to him. That
Oh,
was
she
Right.
was just an icon
beautiful.
of the 50s.
Right.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth became queen in 1952 at the age of 25.
She was
That's,
young.
I remember reading stories
Yeah.
about how young she was.
Yeah.
One of my loved ones said that they remember the transistor radio
Yeah.
was introduced, and I guess that was in '53. And then shortly thereafter, they remember the first TV remote was introduced in '55. So
Not many people had that, though.
No, I don't
it
remember
probably
that
would be
even.
this big, the way I could imagine it, but
Yeah.
that would consider to be luxury.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, as a very, those kind of, because most of us had black and white TVs.
Yeah, and we did get up and go across the room and change
Yep.
that
That
channel,
TV.
and we didn't mind.
No,
And
not at all.
In 1950, the Korean War started, and that wasn't a real happy time for me because my future husband was drafted in '53 and went to Korea in '54 and came home in '55.
That was a war we haven't
took
heard
a
a
long
lot
time.
about lately, but that was a tough time for a while
It
with
was,
that war.
yeah.
At my
And
center,
no
we-
recognition when he came
I
back.
think you're right.
We
yeah.
have Korean veterans at Touching Lives Adult Day Center, and it's a very unique group of veterans. I mean, they're very, well, all veterans are proud, but they're quiet, and just like a lot with World War II, they don't talk much of their past, but with Alzheimer's, we're seeing more and more of the PTSD coming out, and these veterans are sharing their stories now from that era, and it's a history lesson. But there wasn't that grandiose return parties and everything, So that's very true about the Korean veteran. One of my jobs that we asked them was about telephone operators. Nurse was a big thing during that time. And one of them, I love them, one of them said, "I can't remember, but I liked it, and I liked going to work." But again, it goes to saying how fun that time was, during that era. You talked about after the war.
Well, and you mentioned telephone operators.
Yeah.
I remember the crank telephone hanging on the wall. I was young, but it was a strong memory. And my mother using the telephone, I was way too short, and 1 ring, 2 ring, 3 rings for people. And it was a party line. You could hear when someone else was listening. We didn't happen to have an operator in the neighborhood, but some neighborhoods would have an operator that would connect some of the phone calls, but that was fun to use that.
And later
telephone.
with party lines that were just less expensive, and you could end up talking on the phone and have somebody say, "Are you ever going to get off that phone?" I want to get on you. Had to get off very quickly.
Oh, my.
Yes, it was wonderful party lines.
I remember using my brother's 45s. We would, in the 60s, we would go to parties of, at some of our friends' house, and we would take their old 45s with Elvis and, boy, some of the people that he talked about, even Pat Boone. I mean, those are fun times, those little 45s.
Yeah, and everybody bought the singles in those days.
Yeah.
You didn't get to the albums that often.
Right.
But the individual 45s, when you had a favorite song, you'd buy that one.
Exactly. And that's
And
what
then
they play on the radio.
didn't you have to take a centerpiece and screw it onto where the
Right.
prior to that it was 78s, wasn't it?
Right.
And then you had to put that on the center, and then the record would drop, and you could get the right speed and get the
Right.
right
It would
sound.
fit, yeah.
And you could pile up several of them, right, and put the
For the
arm
fancy
across.
units.
Once they got towards the end of the 50s, maybe. Huh?
Do you remember Dinah Shore
Oh,
and
yes.
the TV ad?
Yes.
See the USA
In a
your
Chevrolet.
Loved it.
Wow.
She was great.
Yeah,
She was great.
Yeah, and the Dinah Shore show, and all of the TV shows were like variety shows at the time, or cowboys like Howard
Bonanza.
Cassidy and Roy Rogers and Dale Evans.
Yeah, and the kids' shows were great. Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I remember, and I didn't realize it until I was talking to some of our loved ones, I got my first Barbie And that was introduced in '59.
Was it really?
Yeah, 1959.
Interesting.
And then, you know, and then what was really cool about the Barbies thereafter is that you could bend their arms, and remember that, and they could go like they sound today. So, but yeah, it was in '59.
So as the 50s were fading, Barbie was coming in,
Yeah.
and she's been going strong
Oh,
ever since.
So when was the Mickey Mouse Club?
At
That
that time.
was
It
in
was.
the 50s.
So it
I
was
remember
and it went
watching-
into the 60s, perhaps. I don't.
I think it did. I
Oh,
read.
I saw it. We watched it.
okay.
We-
And Annette Funicello.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
she was the
Oh, we watched all that.
Oh, yeah.
And what was that other one? Was it Howdy Doody?
I remember how
Was that 50s?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
my brothers used to talk about Howdy Doody
Howdy
time,
Doody.
and we didn't. I don't remember it.
And Andy Devine, he was, I don't know if he was on that show or if I saw both those shows back to back on Saturday morning. That was in Iowa. I was pretty young, but I remember.
I think he was
Remember
on that show.
Clellan Card?
Yeah.
I don't know that one.
No, me either.
He was a local guy,
Oh,
and Mary Jo Tierney played his nurse. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, I do.
What was the
Yeah.
name of it?
He had a
Gosh.
pet dog.
Yeah,
And,
and he spoke with this funny little accent.
Was that on Minneapolis television?
It was local. It was
Okay.
local. Yeah.
no, that's not. I was from Ohio, so it was. I didn't
okay,
know
yeah.
at that time. I had no information.
Well, the first Peanuts cartoon strip came out in 1950.
Oh,
If you want to know fun things,
I
and
didn't know that.
the modern credit card in
Yeah,
1950.
1950. Yeah, the credit
And,
card.
But isn't it true
color
that through those
TV.
50s, did any of you have a credit card during those 50s? I mean, they may have come out, but I don't think anyone had credit
parents, no.
cards.
Oh, I don't
well, and
remember. Maybe it was
women
Chuck.
did not
Well, you know-
commonly have credit cards.
Yeah. You know what they were like? They were a metal piece that had the name of the store raised on it.
Oh, sure.
And they had a machine that
So they go
ran
like
over
that?
it.
It's-
I remember.
yeah.
Or it had your name raised on it, I guess. I can't remember.
I can remember
I
that
still
later.
have one
Yeah,
of
I
those.
didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Well, we did put things in layaway. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
that?
I remember layaway.
So you could get anything you wanted, but it'd take a little while to get there, but you knew it was there waiting.
I remember getting milk delivered.
Oh,
And it'd come in our alley, and it'd be go out to the milkman, and we'd get milk and eggs and butter, you know.
And the good humor trucks with ice cream.
Oh, absolutely.
It's nice that they've revived the ice cream trucks a little bit.
That was so fun.
Yeah,
that was
that's
so
a nice
fun as
thing.
kids to run outside and, and go, oh, they're coming, you know. And
Yeah.
one of my loved ones talked about that they remember is the freedom to walk and letting your kids just go play outside.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
You know, now
Not needing to think twice about
no,
that.
and walking to school.
Yeah.
You know, a mile or so.
Yeah,
I remember walking to school in the 60s, and that was 8 blocks.
Yeah.
So today, you
We
just-
lived a mile from
walked
church.
a couple
We used to
miles to
walk to midnight mass, a mile. Beautiful, snowing, dark street lights
pretty.
and everything, and no one would ever do that now.
no.
Playing in the neighborhood, in the streets, and the yards. You know, I just lived for that with
Yeah.
my neighborhood friends.
Yeah, me too.
And it was a different world. And I remember Halloween in particular. We went door to door, and my kids actually did that up until probably the 80s, maybe.
And we did.
And then it all ended.
It changed.
You know?
That all
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
Oh, they still do that in our neighborhood.
Do they?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good for them.
But parents are, you know, later on in the evening, older kids come, but
Yeah.
in the early evening, parents are with every kid.
I see that, yeah. And
Oh,
it
we
did
did
used to be that the kids went out by themselves a whole lot more way back in the
Yeah.
beginnings when they were doing that.
My father was from Pennsylvania, and so in Lorain, Ohio, it was fairly close to Cleveland. We didn't do a lot of the things that we were able to do when we got to Coudersport, Pennsylvania, a very small place, but you'd leave in the morning and then you'd come in at night, and it was you just ran and had a good time and went to swimming or did anything, and nobody worried about you. It was like the whole town was your parents, you know, they were your parents.
Well, and growing up in Groveland, Mac area down by St. Thomas, you know, University of St. Thomas, I remember city blocks, we'd all be playing, going back and forth, and my dad would come out, and again, this was, you know, the same kind of concept coming from the 50s. He'd get out on the porch and make an owl call, and we'd come running, you know. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even do that today, you know, and those are fun times for those kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had a blast with our neighbors.
Yeah.
And
used to
not a
ride
lot
our
of-
bikes
Not
a
a
lot,
lot of
too.
summer air conditioning either. We just toughed it
Oh,
out
no.
with the hot weather.
Oh, and people died.
Yeah, sure, because you just,
Yep.
like you say, tough it out with that hot weather.
Well, DNA was discovered in 1953.
It's
and
amazing
also
how
the
far
first,
back,
the
yeah.
first Playboy magazine came out.
DNA was a little more important, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, the other thing that some of my loved ones talked about was they remember lots and lots of snow, you know, and going to Woolworths and sitting there and at the
The
counter,
soda bar.
soda
Yeah.
bar.
Oh, so
They remember
fun.
that, but
Yeah.
you know, I can remember too some of the incredible snowstorms in the early '60s in our backyard in Lincoln Avenue, and we had a fence, you know, around it. That the fence was, you'd walk up to the top of the fence, you know. And I haven't seen a snowstorm, not that I want one like that in a long time.
I've seen old photographs in old albums where the little kids are standing by these huge snowbanks and mounds, and it is real interesting to see that, because you know there was some. One of the things they talked about, and I don't remember if it was a member of my family or a friend, but I just remember the concept of digging the trench between, because the snow was over the children's heads, and the kids had to go out and do the chores, digging a trench from the house to the barn. And also having a rope.
That's probably what they're talking about. Lots of snow.
Yeah.
Is what they
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember the Emporium and the Golden Rule downtown? The Emporium had a.
I've heard the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
In the lower level, the basement, they had a rotating kind of merry-go-round type, carousel type little restaurant. And they had these wonderful cream cheese sandwiches with pecans in them.
Oh.
And my mom used to take us down there to shop all the time, and
Oh, how nice.
and we'd always
where
have
was
lunch
it?
there, on the corner of Robert and
St. Paul, right?
yeah,
yeah.
7th and Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been where Dayton's
The
was,
Golden
right?
Rule was on
Oh,
the
maybe so.
Sure, I might
the
remember
east side, and the Emporium was on the west side.
I remember
There's still
that.
a Golden Rule
My
building
mom.
down there, but of course the store is closed long ago.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's
You
it.
know the technology that you're talking about, the high-tech stuff. Do any of you remember writing with a pen that you had to dip in your inkwell, and then you would
Yes.
write with the ink?
Yes, and
And
they were old by the
Fountain
time
pens,
I was
Fountain,
using
yes,
them. but
literally. I mean,
loved
fountain pens.
Yeah,
and then
the-
of course,
the
we
fountain
eventually
pen.
got to the
Yeah.
typewriter, but it wasn't the electric type.
Yeah.
It was
the
the
manual.
manual.
After
My
the
mom
dip-
had it like at a desk at our home, and it was like you just the old. You see the writer type, and it leave these big globs of ink on those letters.
Oh, yes. But you were going to say something about the pen, the writing of
Well,
the
after the dip pen, they had the fountain pen. You put it in the inkwell and
and
put the
suck
little
it up
level.
a little bit.
Yeah.
In a cartridge.
That's the
yeah.
that's the one that I had to seek
Unbelievable.
out years later so that I could have one and use it for special letters.
Yeah.
And those were the desks that I guess we were taught to crawl under if there was going to be any problem. You were to go under those desks where the
Yes.
little ink wells were for the earlier times.
That would protect us from a
It'd probably
atom
be
bomb.
these type of desks.
Yes,
we all
that's
had the
easier.
very,
Those were air raid drills
oh
Yes.
my.
because of the
Oh,
threat
sure.
from air raids.
The
Yeah.
bomb.
The
The
bomb.
bomb.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the desk would save us.
It gave us a sense of security.
Absolutely.
didn't it?
We-
You know,
we
at least there
know
was
what we were
something we
doing.
could think
Yeah.
we could do.
But I
There
doubt
were
that.
air raid shelters that were placed around the city,
Mm-hmm.
and they were equipped with food and water and blankets in there, and they were marked, a special air raid shelter mark on the outside of the building. I remember
That's
those.
scary.
And would there have been a siren at that time that was similar to what we, I mean, it wouldn't be the same, obviously, but was there
I
any
think
kind
there
of,
would have been, yeah.
Yeah, I
Some
would think
kind
so.
of-
Yeah, because it was often mentioned in our
Yeah,
school
I-
and church and so
I
on.
don't think it was as regular, though.
Yeah.
You know, they started doing it the beginning of every month now.
no.
And
yeah.
but the schools did drills. We did some drills even into the 60s.
But the drills didn't
I
take
remember
anybody
'em.
into those
No.
prepared shelters. Did they know where all the prepared shelters were?
I remember knowing in our neighborhood, and I was real young, and in the country, but carrying over into the late 50s, I remember hearing about where it was in the town.
Interesting.
And
We practiced a couple of those in our grade school in the early 60s, and I remember going to the basement. You know, we'd all go down into like, there's no windows or anything, and practice. That was at the very early 60s. But then I don't remember quite.
So would that Cold War have been part of the 50s? I was always thinking of it more as the 60s.
Remember McCarthyism?
yeah,
And
Right.
McCarthy hearings, and they were trying to discover who were communists.
And the
Right,
communist was
right.
the
country.
big bad name, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Cold
That
War
was
came all
1950.
through
Joseph
there.
McCarthy was
Yeah.
Sure.
1950 when he started doing that.
J.
The
Edgar
communist
Hoover.
witch hunt.
Yeah.
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 You spoke about letters. Remember, we
writing
used to all
letters.
wright real letters.
Yes, the art
And,
of
and we
writing
learned
letters.
penmanship in school.
They've taken cursive writing out of some
right.
schools.
Unbelievable.
I'm heartbroken.
I remember that was a huge piece of school.
Yeah.
And I
Kids
love
would
seeing
learn
everybody do that because they always had us start with, you had to write the circle on the
Yeah.
in the right lines. They had to come at the right place. And your
Yeah.
hand had to be on the correct spot on the desk
I
so that you
remember
could
that.
make everything round.
And you know, that started a long time earlier because
Yeah.
my mom I have a framed certificate that she did for completing or winning a penmanship
Oh,
contest.
I never won a prize for penmanship, that's for sure.
But there are a lot of people who write letters today that are older and their penmanship is fabulous.
it's
It's amazing.
perfect.
And
yes.
I love getting those letters.
Me too.
I
And
do
they're
too.
personal. You
Yeah.
felt it was real personal because they took the time to write a nice special letter.
Yeah.
And we practiced writing. We thought it was so great we were able to write versus print. That was
Yeah,
it
big
was
step
kind of-
up from
it
grade school.
was.
You know,
It's
you
like
had
you're on your way
yeah,
to an adult.
adult,
Being
yeah.
a grown-up was to be able to write cursive writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a part of, I mean, I remember looking forward to that. You know, I couldn't
Yeah.
wait to learn to be
Yeah.
able to do, you know, writing. And you practiced and practiced to make sure you did it perfect.
But now, when did things like women wearing slacks, when was that become
That
okay?
wasn't in the 50s.
No, everybody
No.
was still in skirts.
Yeah.
And,
I always
Dresses.
wore skirts.
The women in their homes wore aprons in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shirt dresses. I loved shirt dresses.
Me
Yeah.
too. Shirt dresses. Oh.
My
I
mom
have
never
to
wore
think in the
slacks.
somewhere in the later 60s, because my mom would start to wear pantsuits.
Yeah, mid 60s
think it
would
was
be where I might put it
mid-60s.
too.
Somewhere
yeah.
around that time, yeah. In
That
our
was a
s-
big thing. That was huge.
And how about nylons? I mean, after the war, they were during the war, they weren't really using the silk.
No,
but
yeah,
did they
there
come
was silk
back?
stockings before, then it
Then-
became nylons. Well, I kind of hate to end this, but we've run out of time. This has been such a delight, ladies.
It has.
Thank you all
Thank
for coming. Thank you all for watching Generations, the Roundtable Edition. We hope to see you next time.